Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory in for Hashtag the U-Word. It's Friday, July the 22nd. This is Africa 54.
Tunisia stands at a political crossroads as the country prepares to vote on a constitutional referendum. The United Nations says about 295,000 people are now returning to the towns in a remote corner of Ethiopia's northern Afar region. A handful of locals have already returned to their deserted towns to try and rebuild their lives. And in our entertainment segment, Heather Maxwell and virtual guest, Kenyan musician and arranger Eddie Gray, revisit UNESCO's First World Day for the KiSwahili language.
We begin in North Africa, where Tunisians are preparing to vote in Monday's referendum on constitutional amendments suggested by President KiSwahili and contested by many of the nation's citizens. 1 year ago, Tunisian President Said fired his government, suspended parliament and seized sweeping powers. On Monday, Tunisians vote on a draft constitution that critics fear could pull the fledgling Arab Spring democracy back to authoritarian rule. Lisa Bryant reports from Tunisia.
A decade after Tunisians toppled their longtime dictator, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, and unleashed the broader Arab Spring uprising, this North African country may be at another crossroads. President KiSwahili says his proposed constitution, which would sharply strengthen presidential powers and weaken legislative ones, aims to return the country to the revolution's pro-people principles. But a kaleidoscope of rights groups and opposition parties argue otherwise. Many want Tunisians to boycott the referendum.
Monsieur KiSwahili, c'est de bâtir un régime dictatorial.
Mr. KiSwahili is trying to build a dictatorial regime with all powers concentrated in his hands. The referendum's outcome is a foregone conclusion.
N'a aucun enjeu, c'est-à-dire le jeu, il est déjà fait.
Even the head of an expert committee that drafted the charter earlier this year disavows the final version.
For the president, the country has been ruled by a corrupted elite for the last couple of years, and he's trying to bring it back on the right path. From the opposition perspective, obviously, what's happening is a break to democracy and the democratic transition because the president has been preparing this constitution almost on his own.
Many Tunisians are less worried about politics than about making ends meet amid a stuttering economy and soaring joblessness and inflation, especially since the war in Ukraine. Experts say many don't know the details of the draft constitution.
I'm voting for the Constitution Monday because I love my president and my country.
Tunisia's first post-revolution constitution in 2014 took 2 years to draft after wide-ranging input. It established a mixed parliamentary presidential system, but it wasn't a silver bullet to the country's economic and political problems. Said, who shot to power in 2019 as a political outsider, hasn't been able to fix them either. Still, people cheered last year when he suspended the country's bickering parliament. Even today, experts say he retains fading but sizable support.
Said is the most popular person on the scene, and he's largely more popular than any of those parties and all the opposition together. Today, I think most of the opposition parties have lost their credibility among the people.
Experts predict voter turnout for Monday's referendum will be low, but the constitution is likely to pass. Tunisians may be writing the next chapter of their history out of default instead of revolt. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Tunis.
Suspected Islamist militants on Friday attacked a military base in Kati, where Mali's interim president, Colonel Assimi Goïta, lives outside Bamako. The armed forces say they repelled the assault and now have the situation under control. A resident says that at 5 a.m. local time, an identified armed men attacked the town of Kati. Another resident says he was awakened by gunshots and explosions. Malian special forces were deployed in the area and helicopters flew overhead. The French embassy sent text messages to French nationals saying some sort of attack was underway in Kati and urged caution. A convoy carrying Goita later sped away from his house in the direction of Bamako. A gunman in Nigeria killed 17 people, including 5 policemen, in separate attacks in northwest Katsina State, according to police and local officials. This is the latest wave of violence in the region. Late on Wednesday, around 300 bandits on motorcycles attacked a police post near Gatakawa village in the Kankara district, killing 5 policemen, according to a police spokesperson. The attackers also killed 3 civilians from that village. Libyan Emergency Services says that at least 9 people were killed, including a child, in heavy fighting in Libya overnight. The clashes were between militias in Tripoli. Emergency Services said that 25 were wounded, including civilians. The gun battle erupted late Thursday in Ansara, a densely populated neighborhood of eastern Tripoli, between the Al-Rada force and the Tripoli Revolutionaries Brigade, according to media reports. To East Africa now, Ethiopia's civil war between Tigrayan forces, their federal government, and regional forces has left some occupied towns ruined and millions of people displaced. The United Nations says nearly 300,000 people are now returning to towns in a remote corner of Ethiopia's northern Afar region. Henry Wilkins has more.
In the mountains in Ethiopia's northern Afar region, the district of Kanaba was occupied by Tigrayan forces until late April. Locals say you can still see Tigrayan forces' positions in the hills that border Tigray. Although the town is still mostly empty, civilians who fled violence are gradually returning to rebuild their lives since forces aligned with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or the TPLF, have gone, leaving a trail of destruction. Among those civilians is Mohammed Abdullah Mohammed, a local administrator.
Many people have returned to their homes, but many of the homes have been ransacked of their furniture. Also, there are no shops or markets. There is severe hunger, and many children suffer from hunger and lack of food.
According to the UN and local authorities, of around 300,000 people displaced by the conflict in the Afar region, about 295,000 have spontaneously returned to their homes in recent weeks. Stina Abdallah returned to the nearby town of Bahale in June with her son.
When the TPLF entered the city, we ran away to save ourselves. We left everything behind, our livestock and our homes. We did not find anyone to help us. We ran away. But now we have returned. Everything is gone. They took with them everything they could steal and destroyed everything, even the houses.
Local officials showed VOA many houses and businesses that had been burned or ransacked. The TPLF did not respond to a request for comment on the destruction caused to civilian buildings in Afar, but they have denied targeting civilians in the past. Rights groups accuse all parties to Ethiopia's conflict of abuses against civilians and infrastructure. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch say in other parts of the country, such as the disputed region of Western Tigray, ethnic cleansing against ethnic Tigrayans has taken place. In Afar, the local administrator in the town of Erepti says loss of infrastructure is taking a major toll.
Also, the electricity is not available. We had a special generator in the past. When the electricity goes out, we work with it. It was destroyed by the terrorist TPLF. The situation is now difficult here. No electricity, no internet, not even a phone. There were associations that served the citizens in this area and provided water extraction equipment and contributed to saving energy.
In the town of Bahale, an administrator says medical services were disrupted because they were targeted and destroyed.
There is a lot of damage to health facilities. In total, around 16 health facilities that used to provide services to citizens were destroyed.
The TPLF says its forces entered the Afar region to break a humanitarian blockade imposed by the government and the Afar Regional Administration, and only retreated after a ceasefire that allowed aid into Tigray. Meanwhile, in Tigray, the humanitarian blockade means access to medical care is a major issue too, with hospitals being forced to close. The UN's International Organization for Migration says those returning home in Afar and beyond are in urgent need of assistance. While Tigray is inaccessible to journalists, all indications are that the humanitarian situation is similarly desperate. The World Food Programme said last week essential food aid has now been distributed in the region, but government-imposed fuel restrictions still make it difficult for food to reach rural areas. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Northern Afar, Ethiopia.
Well, staying in East Africa, Kenya's electoral authorities condemning the brazen arrest in Nairobi of 3 officials from a company supplying electronic voting systems for next month's presidential poll. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission says the arrest of key personnel from Smartmatic International at Nairobi's International Airport amounts to intimidation, harassment and blackmail. The employees who were detained on arrival Thursday from Venezuela and later released and are legally contracted to deploy and manage election technology infrastructure for Kenya's election on August 9th, according to the IEBC. Now, 5 children of late Angolan President José Eduardo dos Santos have signed a letter agreeing to a state funeral for their father in Angola, according to a letter seen by the AFP news agency. Dos Santos died in Barcelona on July the 8th at age 79 after suffering a cardiac arrest. Since then, the question of when and where he will be buried has pitted the Angolan government and his widow against some of his adult children. He is, according to his children, they would like him to be buried in Angola after the elections of August the 24th. Now, for more on the Dos Santos burial saga, I'm joined by VOA Portuguese reporter João José Santarita. Welcome to Africa 54.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So, these children of Dos Santos are saying, well, we are okay, our father being buried back home, given a state funeral, but on conditions. Now, why those conditions? First, tell us the election. They say it has to be after the election of August 24th.
Well, there's many factors at play here, but let's first go to the letter. It's still a bit confusing because initially it was said that the letter stated that they wanted amnesty because there's a daughter, at least one daughter, which is Isabel dos Santos, the richest woman in Africa, who's being investigated, and one of the sons, Filomeno dos Santos, he's already been sentenced to time in prison, although he's out of prison awaiting an appeal. But so initially what it was said is that the letter asked for an amnesty. Later, one of the daughters, who's been the main spokeswoman for the family, Chisé Velvicia dos Santos, said no, what basically they want is an apology at the National Assembly. Yeah. Well, the Attorney General's office and the Presidential office have said that that's out of the question. Mm-hmm. The Attorney General office doesn't negotiate amnesties over the body of a president. Yeah. So that's the present the situation at the moment. Now, the other point here is that the Spanish courts face a very, very difficult situation because the Spanish courts have said that they will hand the body to the family, quote unquote, when it's finally decided that there was no foul play in the death of the president. Mm. Now, the question here is, who is the family? Because you got the daughters from previous marriages, and you got the widow. And this becomes very difficult because José Eduardo dos Santos had been separated from his wife for a long time, but they were not divorced. So, when the court says it's going to hand the body to the family, the problem is which family. And I must add, there's something else. We talk about this group of children, which are about 4, okay? But José Eduardo dos Santos left many children. He had about 10 children from other marriages and a relationship. So we are not sure that the other children are going along with this group of very vocal José Eduardo dos Santos children.
So what is the significance of this, condition of after the election, if at all it happens?
Well, what the family is saying, or at least José dos Santos is saying, is that João Lourenço wants to use the funeral, because this comes just before the election, as some sort of an event to galvanize the MPLA before the elections. Yeah. The MPLA is slightly divided because in the corruption campaign, anti-corruption campaign that João Lourenço launched, a lot of the base that was the power base of José Eduardo dos Santos, they've been indicted. There's some very high-level officials that have been indicted for corruption or under investigation. So the daughter says that what João Lourenço wants to do is to have this monument to show that the party is united, and that's therefore the significance of the funeral, before or after.
Very fascinating. So we wait and see if indeed they will come to an agreement. João, thank you very much for those insights.
Thank you.
VOA's reporter João José Santa Rita. Now let's go all the way to the tip of the continent. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is hosting Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara in a state visit to Pretoria Friday. Despite being in South Africa, Ouattara is being dogged by questions concerning his country's controversy with Mali. Ouattara dismissed any suggestion that his country sought to destabilize Mali after a group of Ivorian soldiers were detained there and accused of being mercenaries. President Ouattara also voiced hopes for a rapid solution of the dispute, which is straining relations between the two West African countries. French President Emmanuel Macron on Friday hosted Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi at the Elysee Presidential Palace in Paris for a working lunch to discuss diplomatic relations between the two countries. Macron last met Sisi in late 2021 on the sidelines of a conference on the situation in Libya. France and Egypt have cultivated close economic and military ties during Sisi's rise to power between 2013 and 2017. France was the main weapons supplier to Egypt. But are we excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come in our entertainment report, Heather Maxwell speaks with Kenyan jazz guitarist Eddie Gray.
From around the world. Let's go.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Lina Khmoudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other African news, 30 people are dead following a three-vehicle collision Thursday on a highway northwest Nigeria's Kaduna state. The accident occurred when two buses and a car crashed into each other along the 400-kilometer highway linking Kano and Abuja. USAID Administrator Samantha Power says the agency will provide Kenya with $255 million in emergency and development assistance to tackle drought. And the Africa CDC is set to receive $100 million from the World Bank to help African countries prepare for, detect, and respond to disease outbreaks. The January 6th committee wrapped up its first round of public hearings Thursday with a minute-by-minute examination of former U.S. President Donald Trump's actions during the attack on the U.S. Capitol. As VOA congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson reports, the investigation provided new insight into Trump's actions.
You don't concede when there's theft.
187 minutes.
the time between the end of former President Trump's speech at the Stop the Steal rally and the time when he released a taped message telling his supporters to leave the U.S. Capitol.
The President of the United States, who was bound by oath to the Constitution and by duty to ensure the laws are faithfully executed, took no action when the cornerstone of our democracy, a peaceful transition of power, was under attack.
In a final public hearing this summer, the 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the committee alleged Trump not only failed to act during the attack on the U.S. Capitol, he continued to actively encourage the rioters to overturn the counting of electoral votes.
The mob was accomplishing President Trump's purpose, so of course he didn't intervene. Here's what will be clear by the end of this hearing. President Trump did not fail to act during the 187 minutes between leaving the ellipse and telling the mob to go home. He chose not to act.
Trump has criticized the committee's work, calling it unbalanced and unfair. But Thursday, his own advisors, who resigned because of the Capitol attack, testified he was unwilling to stop the violence as he watched the attack on a TV in the White House.
If the president had wanted to make a statement and address the American people, he could have been on camera almost instantly.
Instead, Trump tweeted his displeasure with his Vice President Mike Pence for not overturning the election results.
Trump just tweeted, "Please support our Capitol Police. They are on our side. Do not harm them."
That's saying a lot by what he didn't say. He didn't say not to do anything to the congressman.
In taped depositions, White House advisors said Trump made no effort to call military leaders or law enforcement to stop the attack.
What did President Trump spend his time doing that afternoon while he first settled into the dining room? He was calling senators to encourage them to delay or object to the certification.
Even the day after the attacks, Trump had difficulty condemning the violence in outtakes from the taped speech.
I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
The committee had expected to wrap up its investigation with this hearing, but Vice Chair Liz Cheney said new information is still coming in that will extend their work into September.
Donald Trump made a purposeful choice to violate his oath of office, to ignore the ongoing violence against law enforcement, to threaten our constitutional order. There is no way to excuse that behavior. It was indefensible.
The committee does not have the power to charge Trump with any crimes, but it can use the information it has gathered to make a recommendation to the U.S. Justice Department. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time for our entertainment report, and Heather Maxwell, he's here to tell us about music from East Africa. Hello, Heather.
Hello, Vincent. Hi, everyone. I recently caught up with Kenyan jazz guitarist and arranger Eddie Gray in Nairobi, and he takes us to the heart of a new historic day for East African language and culture. Hi, Eddie. How are you doing?
I'm all right, Heather. Thank you for having me.
So July 7th was the first ever UNESCO World Day for the KiSwahili language. And you were in Lamu, Kenya to inaugurate that day and to celebrate it. Can you describe what it was like?
It was an amazing occasion, especially now that Swahili is recognized as an international language and there's a day to celebrate it. We had a gathering of a couple hundred people in Lamu. We had representatives from the French embassy. We had the Alliance Francaise director. We had members of the Lamu Council. We had a few people from the government, again, representatives as well, to help oversee the event as well. And I had the privilege of leading and arranging the music with the Tarab Orchestra and performing it live for the guests who are in attendance.
Why Lamu?
I guess Lamu is one of the untouched, I would say, areas in Kenya that still practices the old traditional Swahili culture. It's an island that feels like it's 200 years in the past. If you go there, the houses are 400 years old, and the people still practice the very organic, authentic Swahili culture there.
Taarab music in general is considered the essence of KiSwahili culture?
I would say so, yeah. I think mostly because it uses Swahili poetry in its composition.
And now your role, what connects you to Taarab music and to Lamu and to this day specifically?
I had the privilege of working with a lot of Lamu musicians over the last 4 years, and I've always been looking at the idea of fusing the traditional culture and giving it a little bit of a modern, more palatable flavor for today's market. And the Alliance Française picked up on that and some of the projects I had been working on, and they asked that I would present this kind of fusion, the modern and traditional Taarab kind of style. That's what we ended up doing.
Mm-hmm. With the Taarab group An-Nur Sunny?
Yes, it's an amazing group. They have their own way of writing their compositions. I learned as much as I was teaching. I was learning a lot from them.
Well, it looks like people just absolutely loved this experience and your performance. What was it like at the end when everybody was standing and applauding and you had an ovation? How did you feel?
It was amazing, I'd say. The song was called Leo ni Leo, which means today is the day. Since we were marking Swahili Day, we were so proud that this language, this culture is finally being recognized internationally.
Is there going to be an album coming out from the work that you guys did for this day?
Coming this September, after our election period, we're looking at possibly having a tour around Kenya first. We'll pick up the best of what we have to present, and then we will definitely make a record out of that.
I hear the jazz a lot in your guitar playing, in your arrangement. Who are your inspirations, sources of inspiration?
Pat Metheny, Joe Pass, George Benson, a lot of American guitarists, and as well as African guitarists.
Eddie Gray, thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate this, Heather. Thank you very much.
And that's it for today's entertainment. Kwaheri ya kuonana. Back to you, Vincent.
Asante sana, Heather. And that's our Friday entertainment. Be sure to watch and listen to more interviews and live music performances of African music anytime on Heather's Music Time in Africa YouTube channel, Facebook page, Instagram, and on radio every Saturday and Sunday. Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.